Ladies and gentlemen, there is something truly magical about time spent in learning. It is not always loud or flashy. Sometimes it looks like silence, like sitting with a book when everyone else is at a party. Sometimes it feels like failure when you get something wrong over and over again. But in truth, that is where the gold lies. Not in perfection, but in the process, in the journey. In every minute you decide to stay curious instead of giving up. Time spent learning shapes who you become, even when it feels invisible. There is a kind of quiet power in the time you invest in learning. It does not shout. It does not sparkle. It does not win medals right away. But it works in the background, changing you slowly, silently, completely. It is the hours you spend rereading a page to understand a single sentence. It is the nights you spend watching tutorials instead of sleeping. It is the moment you decide to start over after failing a test, not because someone told you to, but because you care enough to grow. In those moments, it might not feel like progress. You may even question yourself, am I wasting my time? Is this even worth it? And that is where the real test begins. Because learning is not just about knowing facts. It is about pushing through discomfort. It is about sticking with something even when it does not make sense yet. You are not just learning a skill. You are building resilience. You are training your brain to see beyond the obvious. You are teaching yourself that struggle is part of the journey, not a sign of weakness. And with each small victory, a solved problem, a new idea understood, a question finally answered, you are building someone stronger. Someone who does not panic under pressure. Someone who trusts their own process. Think of learning like building muscle. You do not see changes after one workout. You go again and again, and slowly your body begins to change. The same thing happens in your mind. The more time you spend learning, the more your thoughts become clearer, your opinions become sharper, and your ability to connect dots becomes faster. It is invisible at first, but it is happening. And here is the thing. Nobody can see your learning until the moment you use it. When you speak with clarity, when you solve a complex problem, when you stay calm under pressure, that is when people notice. But that is only the tip of the iceberg. The real transformation happened long before that moment, when you were learning in silence, when no one was watching. That time, that effort, that commitment, it is building your foundation. It is giving you the strength to stand tall when life throws you storms. Because knowledge is more than information. It is power. And the time you spend acquiring it is like planting roots deep into the ground. Others may look taller right now, but you are becoming unshakable. So when it feels like you are behind, when others seem faster, richer, or more successful, remember this: the time you are spending learning is not a delay. It is a preparation. It is building depth. It is turning you into someone who does not just survive, but someone who understands, who questions, who leads. You might not feel it today, but one day, in the middle of a conversation, in the heart of a challenge, you will respond in a way you never could before. And you will realize this is what all those hours were for. This is the gift of time spent in learning. Learning creates inner strength that does not depend on validation. When you begin to learn not just to pass a test but to understand, you start to build something within yourself that no one else can give you and no one else can take away. It is not loud. It is not flashy. It does not come with applause. But it is there, quietly growing inside you like roots beneath the surface. In a world where so many people are searching for likes, followers, compliments, and constant approval, there is something rare and beautiful about someone who learns for themselves. Someone who is not waiting to be clapped for. Someone who keeps showing up with a notebook, with a question, with a hunger to understand. That person becomes powerful in a way that goes unnoticed at first, but eventually it becomes unmissable. Because the kind of strength that learning gives you is not borrowed, it is not gifted, it is earned. You earn it when you sit with confusion instead of running from it. You earn it when you ask questions, even though others stay silent. You earn it when you challenge what you believe and open yourself to new ways of thinking. That strength, it is real, and it is yours. The more you learn, the less you need the world to tell you who you are. You stop being afraid of being wrong. You stop being afraid of looking foolish. You begin to value effort more than image. And you realize that knowing something deeply is far more powerful than simply appearing smart. Learning teaches you to trust your own mind. It shows you that you can rely on your ability to figure things out, that you can solve problems, decode ideas, find patterns, and make sense of chaos. And once you have tasted that kind of independence, there is no going back. You no longer wait for others to show you the way. You start creating your own path. There is a quiet pride that comes from learning something difficult. Not because someone pushed you, but because you chose to stay when others gave up. That pride becomes a shield. When the world criticizes you, it does not shake you the way it used to, because deep down you know how far you have come. You know what you have survived, and you know you have the strength to keep going. Sometimes you might be the only one in the room who knows the answer, not because you are the smartest, but because you worked for it. You stayed curious. You stayed humble. You did not pretend to know everything. You kept learning. And that is why, slowly, you became someone others turn to. Not just for answers, but for perspective, for depth, for direction. People who keep learning become anchored. Their confidence is not loud, but it is real. It is not built on praise. It is built on proof. The kind of proof that comes from consistent effort, from overcoming self-doubt, from pushing through fear. They do not need to prove anything to anyone. They carry the proof within themselves. And when things fall apart, because sometimes they do, learners do not crumble. They observe, they adapt, they rebuild, because that is what they have trained themselves to do, again and again. Not just in classrooms or books, but in life. They have learned how to learn, and that habit becomes their superpower. So while the world rushes after quick wins, you sit with your books, you wrestle with ideas, you fail, and try again. You grow quietly, and without even noticing, you become strong. Not because someone said so, but because you know so. Every failure in learning is a hidden lesson in disguise. Failure, especially while learning, feels personal. It stings. It makes you question yourself, your intelligence, your potential. But here's the secret. Most people never talk about failure is not the enemy of learning, it is part of it. In fact, some of the most powerful lessons you will ever gain are hidden right inside the moments where everything seems to go wrong. When you fail, you are actually being handed a mirror. It shows you where you hesitated, where you skipped a step, where you misunderstood something. And that mirror, though painful to look into, holds the key to real growth. When a child learns to walk, they fall hundreds of times. Not once do we call those failures. We call it learning. But as we grow up, we start believing that failure means something is wrong with us, that we are not smart enough or good enough. That is a lie. Real learners know that failure is not a stop sign. It is a signal. It tells you where to dig deeper, where to try a new angle, where to pause, rethink, and start again. Sometimes failing at something is the only way to realize you were never fully clear about it. It forces you to look again, and in that second attempt, something clicks. You see what you missed, You understand what you could not see before. That moment right there, that aha moment, would never have arrived without the failure. Failure is not wasted effort. It is effort being refined, recalibrated, redirected towards something better. There is also something humbling about failing. It softens the ego. It reminds you that you are human, that you are learning, that perfection is not the point. It opens the door to empathy. You begin to see others struggling, not as weak or slow, but as brave, because you know how it feels. That makes you not just a better learner, but a better person. Some of the brightest minds in history failed repeatedly. They were laughed at, doubted, ignored, but they kept learning, kept experimenting, kept failing forward. They saw failure not as defeat, but as data. They used every fall as a map, pointing them closer to the answer. You can do the same. You are allowed to fall. You are allowed to not get it right the first, second, or even 10th time. What matters is not how fast you get it. What matters is how deeply you understand it once you do. When you fail, you also learn something about yourself that success never teaches. You learn about your patience, about your grit, about your ability to get up even when it hurts. That kind of self-awareness is a lesson no book can teach. You only earn it through experience, through showing up again when no one is watching, through continuing to believe in the process, even when there is no applause. There is a quiet kind of power in people who keep going after failing. They do not give excuses. They do not blame others. They simply return to the table and try again. And over time, those failures become stepping stones. Not in theory, but in real, practical terms. Each wrong answer leads you closer to the right one. Each breakdown clears the way for a breakthrough. That is how learning works. That is how mastery is built. So when you fall, do not be afraid to look closely at what went wrong. It is not shameful. It is educational. It is part of the journey. It is how you grow from a student into a thinker, from a follower into a leader, from someone who memorizes into someone who truly understands. Investing time in learning gives you tools to face uncertainty. Life is unpredictable. Plans change, situations shift, people leave, and opportunities appear where you least expect them. In a world that moves fast and rarely waits, the most valuable thing you can carry with you is not a title, not a certificate, not even a job. It is the set of tools you have built through learning. These tools are not physical, they live inside your mind. They shape how you respond when everything feels out of control. They are your calm in the storm, your compass in confusion, your light in the dark. Every time you sit down to learn, whether it is a new skill, a concept, a language, or even a small idea, you are sharpening one of those tools. It may not feel like much in the moment. You might not see the purpose right away, but learning does not always show its value in real time. It waits. Then when life throws something unexpected at you, those tools rise to the surface. You suddenly remember something you read, something you practice, something you failed at but never gave up on. And in that moment, you realize you are not lost. You are prepared. Facing uncertainty becomes less frightening when your mind is trained to stay curious. Instead of panicking, you start asking, what can I do with what I know? What do I need to find out next? What options do I have? That mindset turns fear into fuel. It keeps you moving forward instead of freezing. And that is what learning does. It rewires how you handle the unknown. When you learn regularly, you become comfortable with not knowing everything. That might sound strange, but it is actually a strength. People who never learn are terrified of uncertainty because they are always trying to control everything. Learners know better. They know that control is an illusion. What you can have instead is preparation, adaptability, and resilience. These are not just nice words. They are real abilities that learning gives you, little by little, page by page, question by question. Imagine you are faced with a sudden challenge, a new job, a technical issue, a change in environment. If you have spent time learning, your brain will not shut down. It will start exploring. You will break down the problem, connect it with something you learned before, test a possible solution, and keep going. That is not luck. That is the result of time invested in sharpening your mental tools. These tools also protect your confidence. When the future is uncertain, it is easy to feel powerless. But learners do not feel powerless. They feel ready. Not because they know exactly what will happen, but because they trust themselves to figure it out. That inner trust cannot be bought. It is built over time, through effort, failure, and reflection. Learning also gives you the ability to support others during uncertain times. When everyone else is panicking, you can be the one who stays calm. Not because you have all the answers, but because you have learned how to find them. You can guide, reassure, and help others think clearly. That ability turns you into a leader, even if you are not trying to be one. When you look at successful people, you might see the final result. But if you look closer, you will find years of learning behind every calm decision, every clever move, every breakthrough. They did not guess their way through uncertainty. They equipped themselves. They practiced, they studied, they stayed curious, and when the unknown came knocking, they were not afraid to open the door. Learning makes you ready, not perfect, not fearless, but prepared. And in a world full of unknowns, that preparation becomes your quiet advantage. Learning teaches you how to adapt and think independently. In the beginning, learning feels like gathering pieces of information. You are handed facts, dates, formulas, meanings, and you try your best to store them all. But slowly, as you keep going, something bigger starts to happen. You realize that learning is not just about collecting knowledge, it is about learning how to think. It is about how to take that knowledge, question it, reshape it, and apply it in situations you have never faced before. That is when learning becomes powerful. It trains your brain not to rely on others for answers, but to seek them yourself. Adaptability is one of the most underrated results of learning. When you are faced with something new or uncertain, your brain does not freeze. It starts asking, what do I already know that can help here? What is missing? What do I need to understand before I move forward? These kinds of questions are signs of a mind that has been trained to respond, not react. A mind that has been shaped by real, thoughtful learning. Independent thinking does not mean you always have the right answer. It means you are not afraid of being wrong. You are willing to test your ideas. You are comfortable saying, I do not know yet, but I can find out. It means you are not just echoing what others say. You are forming your own thoughts, your own voice. That is one of the greatest gifts learning gives you. It frees you from blindly following. It teaches you how to analyze, how to doubt, how to reflect, and in doing so, it gives you the ability to lead. People who learn deeply do not panic in changing situations. They adjust. They observe. They ask better questions. They are not thrown off when something unfamiliar shows up, because they know how to break it down. They know how to research, how to explore, how to test ideas before jumping to conclusions. And because of that, they often find solutions others miss. Not because they are faster, but because they are more flexible. The world is changing constantly. What worked yesterday may not work tomorrow. That is why learning cannot stop at school or college. Real learning continues for life. And the more you keep learning, the more adaptable you become. You stop being afraid of change. You stop clinging to the way things were. You start looking forward to what can be improved. You become someone who brings clarity in chaos, someone who helps others see new possibilities. Independent thinking also brings freedom. It allows you to step away from the pressure of always fitting in. You no longer need to follow trends just to feel secure. You begin to trust your own choices. You begin to form opinions that are based on understanding, not noise. And you carry that strength with you everywhere. In relationships, in work, in moments of crisis. It becomes part of who you are. You also start to learn how to learn. You begin to notice how you absorb things. What helps you focus? What kind of questions open your mind? That self-awareness becomes your compass. It helps you learn faster, deeper, and in your own way. You stop depending on others to push you. Your curiosity becomes the engine. The more you learn, the more you notice patterns. The more you explore, the more connections you begin to see between different ideas. And with every connection you grow more confident in your ability to navigate the unknown. That is how learning shapes your mind. Not just to hold information, but to use it, shape it, and make something new out of it. That is the kind of mind that does not just survive in this world. It leads. Patience and learning go hand in hand in long-term success. We live in a time where speed is celebrated. People want instant answers, quick results, overnight success. But learning does not work that way. It moves slowly. It demands time, effort, and most importantly, patience. You cannot rush real understanding. You cannot shortcut true growth. When you decide to become a learner, you are also making a silent agreement to be patient with yourself, with the process, and with the journey. The early stages of learning are often filled with confusion. You read something, and it just does not make sense. You try a task, and you fail. You listen to an explanation, and it still feels like a foreign language. That is when most people give up. But those who learn to be patient push through. They try again. They stay a little longer. They believe that clarity will come, even if it takes time. That belief is what separates short-term learners from those who grow into masters. Patience is not about waiting passively. It is about staying committed even when results are not visible. It is about trusting that your brain is making connections, even if you cannot see them yet. Sometimes, after weeks of struggling, you suddenly understand something. Not because the material changed, but because you gave your mind the time it needed to absorb, process, and connect the dots. That is the hidden magic of patience. It allows real learning to take root. When you lack patience, you become focused only on outcomes. Did I get the answer right? Did I finish the course? Did I score high? But when you embrace patience, your focus shifts to the process. You start asking deeper questions. What did I learn today? What challenged me? What did I understand better than yesterday? These are the kinds of reflections that lead to real long-term growth. Success that comes from learning is not instant. It is built slowly, layer by layer. One concept leads to another. One mistake teaches you something you did not expect. One moment of doubt becomes the starting point of deeper curiosity. And through it all, patience keeps you grounded. It reminds